A letter arrives in Rome addressed to the Pope. It bears the seal of an emperor, and inside 50 bishops have signed their names beneath a list of accusations so obscene that the monk transcribing them actually apologized to God for writing the words down. The charges include adultery, incest, murder, gambling, drinking toasts to Satan, and turning the holiest palace in Christendom into what one chronicler would only describe as a house of harlots. The Pope reads this letter. He is 22 years old, and his response, he tells them all to go to hell. Not metaphorically, he threatens to excommunicate every single bishop who signed it. This is the story of Pope John XII, the teenager who inherited the throne of St. Peter, the way other boys inherited farms, and who proceeded to throw the most depraved party the Vatican has ever seen. It lasted almost a decade, and the way it ended is even more shocking than how it began. To understand how an 18-year-old wound up running the Catholic Church, you need to understand his father. Alberic II was the Prince of Rome, a secular strongman who controlled the city and, by extension, controlled whoever sat in the chair of St. Peter. Alberic had spent his entire adult life keeping popes on a leash. He appointed them, he bullied them, and when they displeased him, he replaced them. Rome in the mid-900s was not the spiritual capital of a unified faith. It was a feudal war zone dressed in vestments, and Alberic ran it like a mafia boss with a crucifix. His son was born around 937 and given the name Octavian. Not a saint's name, a Roman emperor's name. Alberic had ambitions for this boy that went beyond anything a normal prince might dream up. On his deathbed in 954, Alberic gathered the Roman nobility and the clergy and made them swear a sacred oath. When the current pope died, they would elect Octavian, his teenage son, as the next bishop of Rome. Not because the boy was pious, not because he had any theological training, but because Alberic wanted his bloodline to hold both secular and spiritual power over Rome simultaneously. The nobles swore, the clergy swore, and then Alberic died, trusting that a promise made over a dying man's body would hold. It did. Pope Agapetus II died in 955, and the Roman clergy, honoring their oath, elected Octavian as pope. He was either 16 or 18 years old, depending on which source you trust. He took the name John XII, becoming one of the youngest popes in history, and almost immediately things went sideways. Here is what we know about John XII's early papacy, and I want to be transparent. Most of what we know comes from his enemies, particularly a chronicler named Liutprand of Cremona, who despised him, so take the specifics with a grain of salt. But even if you cut Liutprand's account in half, what remains is extraordinary. John XII had zero interest in being a spiritual leader. He had grown up as Roman royalty, surrounded by wealth and power, and he treated the Lateran Palace, the papal residence at the time, as his personal playground. The accusations that would later be compiled against him paint a picture of a young man completely untethered from any sense of consequence. He allegedly gambled openly, invoking the names of pagan gods and even the devil while throwing dice. He drank heavily and toasted to demons at banquets. He was said to have ordained a 10-year-old boy as a bishop. He reportedly conducted ordinations in a stable. He set fires for entertainment, and then there were the women. According to the charges brought against him, John XII slept with an almost unbelievable number of women, including his father's mistress, his own niece, and numerous married women of Roman nobility. The Lateran Palace, these accusers claimed, had essentially become a brothel, with women afraid to make pilgrimages to Rome because the Pope himself might assault them. Whether every specific allegation is true, the sheer volume of complaints from multiple independent sources suggests that something deeply abnormal was happening inside those walls. This was not a pope who occasionally bent the rules. This was a young man who appeared to view the most powerful religious office in the Western world as a VIP pass to do whatever he wanted. For all his personal chaos, John XII was not politically stupid. He had inherited a problem from his father. The Italian king, Berengar II, was aggressively expanding his territory and threatening papal lands. John needed muscle. So in 960, he did something that would reshape European history. He sent envoys across the Alps to Otto I, the King of Germany, and offered him a deal. Come to Italy, crush Berengar, and I will crown you Holy Roman Emperor. Otto accepted. He marched into Italy in 961, swept Berengar aside and arrived in Rome in early 962. True to his word, John XII placed the imperial crown on Otto's head on February 2, 962, reviving the concept of a Holy Roman Empire and creating a political alliance between the papacy and the German crown that would define European politics for centuries. But John made a critical miscalculation. He assumed Otto would be like the other strongmen he'd dealt with, someone who would do the military work and then leave. Otto was not that kind of ruler. Otto was methodical, moralistic, and he had absolutely no intention of propping up a teenage degenerate as the spiritual leader of his empire. Almost immediately, the relationship soured. John, suddenly terrified that he had invited a predator into his own house, began secretly negotiating with Otto's enemies, including the very same Berengar he had asked Otto to destroy, and even envoys from the Byzantine Empire and the Magyars. When Otto found out, the alliance didn't just fracture, it detonated. In November 963, Otto marched back to Rome. John XII fled the city, reportedly carrying the papal treasury with him. In his absence, Otto convened a synod, a formal ecclesiastical trial, at St. Peter's Basilica. Bishops and clergy from across Italy and Germany gathered, and the list of charges they compiled against the absent pope was unlike anything the Church had ever produced. They accused him of ordaining bishops for money, of committing adultery with specific named women, of blinding his spiritual father, of castrating and killing a cardinal, of setting houses on fire, of invoking demons, and of drinking wine in honor of the devil. The synod sent John a letter demanding he return and answer these charges. John's written reply was breathtaking in its arrogance. He essentially told them that their proceedings were illegitimate, that no earthly council had the authority to judge a pope, and that if they didn't back down, he would excommunicate every last one of them. The synod deposed him anyway. They elected a new pope, Leo VIII, in his place. For the first time in history, an emperor had effectively removed a sitting pope from power. It should have been the end of the story. It was not. Otto eventually left Rome. The moment he did, John XII came roaring back. In February 964, he returned to the city with an armed force, and the Romans, who had never been particularly loyal to anyone for long, welcomed him back. What followed was a purge. John XII hunted down everyone who had participated in the synod against him. One cardinal had his right hand chopped off, another had his nose and ears cut off. A church official who had spoken against him was flogged publicly. Leo VIII, the replacement pope, barely escaped the city with his life. John XII had reclaimed the papacy through violence, and for a brief moment he was triumphant. He was still in his early 20s. He had outmaneuvered an emperor. He had taken revenge on his enemies. He was untouchable. And then, on May 14th, 964, he died. The most famous account of his death, again from Liudprand of Cremona, claims that John XII was in bed with a married woman when her husband burst in and caught them. The husband reportedly beat the Pope so severely, some versions say he threw him from a window, that John died from his injuries several days later without ever regaining consciousness. He was somewhere between 25 and 27 years old. Other sources say he simply suffered a stroke. The truth is, we will probably never know. But the fact that his enemy's version of his death, killed by a cuckolded husband, was so readily believed by contemporaries tells you everything about his reputation. Nobody doubted it was plausible. John XII reigned for 9 years. In that time, he accidentally created the Holy Roman Empire, turned the papal palace into a scandal factory, was deposed and came back, and died under circumstances that would be rejected as too melodramatic for a television script. He is a reminder that the history of the papacy is not a clean, solemn procession of holy men. It is, at times, an absolute circus. Now here is something that should keep you up tonight. John XII was not the only pope whose death was suspiciously convenient for powerful people. About 500 years later, there was a pope whose body turned black and swelled so grotesquely after death that his coffin could not be closed, and half of Rome whispered a single word: poison. That story is coming. If you want to be here when I tell it, you know what button to hit. I will see you in that one.